Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. It was awesome to hear all the poets earlier. My name is Ranade. I'm a climate justice advisor for NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I want to try to walk you through New York's climate change law. There's a lot of information, but I'll do my best to give you a high-level summary, and my hope is that if you're interested in more information, really, please sign up on the clipboard there or ask for my card, and we can keep in touch. And as all of you probably know, every law that we have on the books, particularly laws that are transformational like climate change, it requires a people-powered movement. It's going to have to be that. So we do have a really amazing law on the books, and part of my job is to help implement it. But in order for it to be successful, we're all going to have to be in this together. This law was passed. I call it the Climate Act for short. It was passed in 2019, and it's really one of the most ambitious out there in terms of cutting pollution and building resilience to climate change. And it is supposed to require holistic actions to create a higher standard of living for everyone and a green economy that works for everyone. And I just want to note that I interned for President Obama. I worked on his first election and his re-election. I didn't work on the My Brother's Keeper initiative, but I was always inspired by it. And I also know that in order for our climate law to be successful, we really have to close the opportunity gap that MBK is focused on. And I think we can through our community empowerment and investment that will improve health and well-being and lead to local economic development. So a big part of my job is to support these two bodies that you see here. They were created by the Climate Act to carry out important functions. Climate Action Council on the top, they have drafted a scoping plan that is open for public comment right now through June 10. That scoping plan is a framework for how we can achieve our greenhouse gas reduction targets. Once your public comments are in, they'll consider them, and a final plan will be released at the end of this year. That plan will then go to the governor and the legislature. Those recommendations in the plan that can be done through executive action, can be done that way. Those that require legislative approval will need to be passed by the legislature next year. So that is a huge effort that I would love for you to check out more on the website, and I'll just try to give you some high-level summaries of what that is. Separately, the Climate Justice Working Group was established by the Climate Act to draft the criteria for disadvantaged communities. And by virtue of things like poverty, racial and ethnic discrimination, there are communities in the state, as defined on the census tract level, that bear a disproportionate burden of pollution and climate change. So the law, part of what makes this so transformational is our climate law requires these communities to receive priority consideration in the development of clean air regulations, climate resilience measures, and the accrual of the benefits of the state's the state's clean energy investments. They have to be prioritized to benefit disadvantaged communities. So the criteria for disadvantaged communities is also out for public comment now. And those comments are being accepted till July 7th. So I'd highly encourage you to check that out, and I'll also touch on that. So my presentation will largely focus on these two laws, but after talking with Ed, he also wanted me to focus on the green economy. Unfortunately, all of the students are gone. But hopefully this information will be shared with them, because I did pull out a lot of programs and internships and programs, and we have a job study, so I'll get into that in the second half of my presentation. Let me just make sure this works. Okay, there we go. So on this slide, I want to convey our state's the clean energy and the justice goals that were established by the Climate Act. So on the left, you see the two top-level targets. By the year 2040, New York has to get 100% of its electricity must come from zero-emission sources. By the year 2030, 70% of the electricity must come from renewable sources. To help, these are really huge goals. To help meet them, the Climate Act also set minimum targets for the deployment of offshore wind, for distributed solar, for energy storage, and for on-site energy conservation in buildings and industrial facilities. So, unless you really work in energy, these megawatt numbers may not mean anything to you. I mean, I kind of have a hard time grasping them, but what I tried to do is I wanted to, just to give you a sense of the scale, I wanted to let you know where we are today in each of these. So you see the progress below, like offshore wind, 9,000 is our goal. We have 30 megawatts built, and then we have another 4,300 contracted. And so we obviously building these renewable energies and taking these steps will help ensure that our electricity is clean. And the investments in clean energy made under the Climate Act will have a range of health and economic benefits. To ensure that these benefits advance justice, the Climate Act requires that at least 35%, with the goal of 40% of the benefits of the state's clean energy spending be realized in disadvantaged communities. So this requirement applies to state-funded clean energy and energy efficiency projects in housing, transportation, energy generation, programs for low-income bill assistance, and in energy-related workforce development and economic development. In addition, a really important point, to maximize their equity, the Climate Act required our state at the end of last year to produce a report on the barriers to increasing access to clean energy and climate resilience measures in disadvantaged communities. There's a whole lot of barriers to getting these programs to actually benefit and reach the community. So we had to study what those barriers are, recommend opportunities to overcome them, and then that report has to get merged into the final version of the scoping plan. At a high level, I'll just say the barriers were economic structures, building conditions. Like if you want to get your home retrofitted, sometimes you can't do it if there's like, I forget the exact detail now, but sometimes if the home could be in such bad condition, it requires some other type of an upgrade first before you can get an energy retrofit. There's also like programs that are just not designed well to reach communities, not implemented well. So the opportunities to remove these barriers, I'd say they break down into three themes. One is to make public processes more inclusive, so the government works more directly with the community in developing programs. Streamlining program access to make it easier, improving customer service, and then proactively addressing emerging issues like gentrification, for example. So in the forthcoming slides, I'm going to share a couple of these scenarios that are proposed in the draft scoping plan to achieve our climate targets. But I just want you to keep in mind that in any of the scenarios, the clean energy investments will have to have a lens of justice. Just real quick, I wanted to give you a sense of our emissions by the year 2030. Our statewide emissions target is to we have to lower emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030. By the year 2050, we have to reduce emissions by 85%. We have to reduce emissions by 100% below 1990 levels by 2050. 85% of that target can be met by preventing the release of greenhouse gases. The other 15% of the goal can be met by targets or projects that remove carbon from the air, like trees, soil, wetlands, or also technology that, drawdown, right, exactly. And there's technologies that also suck carbon in, so 15% of the goal up to can be met by that. On the left, you see the current estimates of New York's emission sources. In order, our largest emissions are buildings, then transportation, electricity generation, then waste, industrial processes and products, agriculture, heavy industry, fugitive emissions from fossil fuel systems. The policies and strategies to reduce emissions in all of these sectors, they're really interconnected. Clean energy can lower emissions in all of them, but clean energy will play a particularly significant role in reducing emissions in buildings, in transportation, and in electric power generation. So this slide summarizes the scenarios in the scoping plan that have been proposed to meet the emission reduction targets. Each scenario, has different combinations and degrees of ambition of energy and land use and pollution reduction goals. The scenarios were based on an integration analysis that drew on extensive input from advisory panels, the Climate Justice Working Group, and the Just Transition Working Group, which the Climate Act established to focus on an equitable transition for our workforce. So I won't have time to go into the scenarios, but the 7 distinct solutions that you see there are generally very important features in all of the scenarios. And a really important point is that the integration analysis, it estimated that the net benefits of any scenario range from $90 to $120 billion after you compare the costs of the new energy spending on one side with the health and the climate benefits on the other side. Because in implementing the Climate Act, we're going to make sure that the benefits are realized where they can close the gap in terms of environmental health quality. And those benefits will include lower energy bills from energy efficient homes and vehicles, universal access to reliable transit, walking and biking infrastructure, and these goals can also help to correct an injustice that was mentioned earlier around redlining, where discriminatory housing policies really relegated Black families and other communities of color to live closest to polluting freeways and furthest from amenities like parks and high quality transit. So as we implement this law, we can correct that injustice. Important thing I want to point out is that this the 90 to $120 billion net benefit, that's just the health and the climate benefits. That does not include the jobs. And there's a whole host of economic activity that will result from those jobs. And I'll get into that later. So what I want to share now are the hearings. And hot off the press, I'm really excited to share that a new hearing has been added in Peekskill. That is on May 4th. I would highly, assuming that that's close by roughly for everybody, that would be awesome if you come to that. Please go to climate.ny.gov and you can get the exact address and location, but this is where the rest of the hearings are in our state. I'll be at Brooklyn, Tupper Lake. I might be at Peekskill as well. Every person gets 2 minutes to give comments, and of course, your written comments can be as extensive as you would like. Please make sure to get them in by June 10. And I think my advice, depending on who you are and where you're coming from, certainly one thing is to focus on your values, what you would like to see in your community, and then, unless you work on these policies, and maybe I'm sure you'll have more in-depth stuff, but you could also just talk about how, the things that you would like to see and maybe some of the challenges and the barriers that you've seen to getting those things, and how you might propose they be addressed, like good quality transit, as one example, access to healthy food as another example. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the draft criteria for disadvantaged communities. So the state has to prioritize its implementation in reducing greenhouse gases, as well as co-pollutants, which are also released from greenhouse gas sources and can damage the ecosystem and the health. And the state also has to use, like I mentioned earlier, disadvantaged community criteria as it implements climate protection measures. So we want to protect communities from flooding and from heat waves. We have to prioritize by this. So this is just kind of a high-level snapshot of what is in the proposed definition. The Climate Justice Working Group looked at 170 different indicators of what a disadvantaged community could be. They, after significant analysis, they reduced it to 45. The Climate Act requires them to be drawn from two components. One is environmental burdens and climate risks. The other is population characteristics and health vulnerabilities. Communities are defined on a census tract scale. Geographically, the draft criteria would cover 35% of New York's census tracts. In addition, 19 census tracts where at least 5% of the land is owned by an indigenous nation is also included. Furthermore, the criteria also includes every household in the state that is classified as low income, as defined by income that is at or below 60% of the statewide median income. On an annual basis, the working group will have to evaluate these criteria, because evaluating our progress is obviously important to ensure that the state continues to prioritize climate action on eliminating the disparities in the quality of life across our state so that, it improves for everyone. This slide helps to visualize the data and the scoring methods. So, the two components are multiplied with each other. Each component has factors, and environmental climate risk has 3, population characteristics has 4, and then below them are the indicators, which I can get into in a moment. But basically, the way that this works is that within each of these indicators, the census tracts are scored according to the level of burden measured by each indicator. So if there's one census tract that has like a high amount of particulate matter pollution, then that ranks as vulnerable in that category. And then you go down every single indicator, and then you multiply them, and so you get what is called a cumulative impacts analysis, and you get an overall score. So to ensure that there was statewide coverage, the working group proposed that a census tract would rank as disadvantaged if its overall burden score ranked in the top 27.4% of the whole state. It would qualify. Or it could be in the top 27.4% of New York City, or it could be in the top 27.4% of the rest of the state. And they came up with that specific number of 27.4% because they wanted to, they didn't want like a huge amount of the state to be considered as disadvantaged, because that could sort of help defeat the purpose, because you want to make sure that these benefits are going to places where they are really needed. So, if you just want to take a moment to visualize this, and you can obviously look this up online, but these are the indicators from the environmental category, and it's divided up further into climate risk, land use and facilities associated with historical discrimination and disinvestment, and pollution exposures. So we have data in all of these, and kind of like, really the goal is to make sure that we're making progress, is to keep tracking this data, and so that we can see that we're benefiting the community. This is the population characteristics and health vulnerabilities. Notably different from the one that the White House has proposed with the Justice 40 initiative. New York State's initiative does include race as a factor, and Latino, Latina, and Black households are double weighted, and also income is also double weighted. So I think it's fairly holistic, and I would love for you to offer your comments once you look at it and see what you think when you do a deeper dive. So now I was going to go into the job study. Should I pause for questions here, maybe? Yes. Okay. Yeah, okay, great question. So so she asked about the carbon sequestration, what that would look like. So that can be healthy soil. I think the term is regenerative soil, having cover crops, because you can hold carbon in soil and it improves the nutritional value of the food. You can trees, afforestation, reforestation, that's another significant one. Wetlands restoration. I think there's things like probably, I'm not in like a technical expert, but I think green roofs may also qualify. Any type of vegetation that can sequester carbon would count. There's also other technologies that could count. Like, I think it's in Iceland where they have, it's pretty expensive, but they have technology that can just suck carbon out of the air. And then, you can turn it into useful products like soda or soap. So that's largely what it is. And I'll mention this in the job study, but one thing you might want to do is look on the Climate Act website and look at the agroforestry and working lands job study, because that also just talks about the carbon sequestration that's going to happen. I would say generally natural solutions are really, really, really important because it improves the quality of life and has so many other benefits as well as sequestering carbon. So, that's going to be a big part of it.
I think that the question that I have is going to be answered by your next topic, because I wrote down about 15 minutes ago, if the dirty energy that we're producing now is also our jobs. How are we going to survive, right? And what type of programs will be available to college students or to people who are going to need. I'm retiring in July, so I'll be benefited by the clean energy. But what about those coming after us?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that I would encourage you to do if you can is to look at the just transition chapter of the scoping plan. Part of it is for those who will likely lose their jobs. There's supposed to be all kinds of support, like peer counseling, income support, educational and retraining assistance. So the state will need to provide that, and that will be a part of the plan. And as you can see, and I'll just pivot, do you want me to pivot to the job study, or should I can just come back to this in a second if there's more questions, or?
I think that you probably need to come back. No, you just come back to it because I don't want you to.
Because I will answer your question just as I get into this. So, and we can also just go to the reserved questions for the end too. I'll just dive in. The job study it's very crucial. The Just Transition Working Group required the production of this study, and they had to conduct an inventory of the jobs that would be needed to combat climate change and the skills and the training required to meet the demand of these jobs. It also examined the jobs that would be lost. The study found that overall, in the 4 sectors that you see on the table, so buildings, electricity, fuels, transportation, overall, by the year 2030, the workforce would be at 189,000 jobs, representing an increase in size of 38%. It also projected the study out to 2050. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to project things out that far, but by 2050, it projected the workforce would grow by 54%. Buildings and electricity were found to be the growth sectors because buildings is a huge source of our emissions. So, to retrofit all of our buildings, that's going to be a huge amount of work. And you can see there's also some projected decreases in the fuel sector. 4% 2030. By 2040, fuel sector is projected to decrease by 27%. I think that's largely because of the reduction in natural gas use that is forecasted. A very slight decrease in transportation. But I think a key stat is the study shows that for every job potentially lost, 10 would be created. And net jobs were found to occur in every corner of the state. The largest increases would be in installation and repair. The wage profile showed an estimate that middle wage sector jobs between $28 to $37 an hour would be the largest increase would be there. As I mentioned, there is a working land study for agriculture and forestry jobs. That was not covered by this, but that is also on the website, and that will be a significant part of it. So now I will turn to some of the programs that we are offering to provide those pathways. It's a start. We have a lot more work to do, but we put in $120 million into workforce development, and this should help prepare to hire 40,000 workers. So this is the first program, our on-the-job training program. It provides wage subsidies to eligible businesses to reduce the financial risk of hiring and training new workers. The wage reimbursement ranges from 50 to 75% for a training period, with higher incentives for minority women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and for businesses hiring workers on heat pumps. And when businesses hire residents of disadvantaged communities or those who are in a priority population, the wage subsidy is for 6 months. It's for 4 months for other hires. I'm not sure, who here is in a business. So, could somebody raise their hand if they're in a business, clean energy business? Oh, Ed. Okay. So the business must provide service to be eligible. The business must provide services in one of the technology areas listed on the slide, and you would just go. The first step is to fill an application online. So let me go through a couple of these programs. This is the Clean Energy Internship Program, similar to the on-the-job training program. This offers wage subsidies for qualifying businesses to hire interns, either during the summer or on a part-time basis. Interns can be current students or recent graduates, or residents of disadvantaged communities, priority populations. The wage reimbursement for interns is either 70 to 95%, depending on the size of the business. And the eligibility is kind of the same. The business has to be in some of those technology areas. Interesting thing about this is that this internship program is also open to municipalities. And we have a combined business application for both this and the internship program, so businesses, it'll be easier for them to do the application. This is a really great one, the Climate Justice Fellowship. This provides up to $40,000 for organizations to hire a fellow working on climate justice or clean energy initiatives in disadvantaged communities. The fellow must be a resident of a disadvantaged community, and the funding provides salary reimbursement for up to $37,000, and an additional $3,000 is available for supportive services like professional development, mentoring, and helping them overcome barriers to employment. Of course, the organization can pay them more than the $40,000 if they want. The application for this is closed right now, but it will open back up later this year. So if you have a nonprofit, for example, you could hire a fellow. We also have an energy efficiency and clean technology program to support larger scale training projects for both new workers and existing workers. Funding can support like community colleges in a range of workforce development activities like curriculum development or modification, training delivery, the purchase of training equipment, coordination and hands-on work experience and job placement assistance. And this funding opportunity really seeks to address the equity gap in the clean energy industry by increasing access to workforce training and skills development opportunities in disadvantaged communities and priority populations. Career pathway, training partnerships for high efficiency HVAC and heat pumps. Again, this is very important because our buildings produce a lot of emissions, so we're going to create a lot of jobs in this field. So, we have a specific career pathway for this one. There's also another program that provides training for building operators. A significant number of participating projects to date are building operators in affordable housing properties or other buildings in disadvantaged communities. There's also Grid for Good, partnership with National Grid to provide introductory training on heat pumps and building electrification to individuals aged between the ages of 16 and 24. This is one that I would say is very near and dear to my heart. It's the Cecil Corbin Marks Fellowship. As you may know, Cecil was a community leader, extraordinary community leader and environmental justice advocate. I had the chance to meet him once at a conference. he tragically died in 2020. So, you know, his influence has been huge. And so in his memory, we've launched an annual fellowship. It's available for an individual. This is less about, like, you know, in the hard sector of installing clean energy and stuff. This is more for policy and program development. The fellow will get to work on that at NYSERDA. You'll probably get to work with me. And this is in partnership with We Act for Environmental Justice, where he was employed at. And also, I should mention that he was a member of the Climate Justice Working Group when he passed away. So We Act has their own Cecil Corbin Marks Fellowship. That's closed, but ours is open until June of this year. So if you know anybody who's interested, or if you may be interested, I'd highly encourage you to apply. And this is something that we hope to continue on an annual basis. And this is the last, this is the last slide. I would really encourage you to just keep in touch. I know I've covered things at a really high level. So, you know, if you want to think about it, you have questions, feel free to reach out. Definitely try to come to the hearings, and I'd really encourage you to offer comments. So, thank you.